mode.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is Harry Brailsford with SMB Nation, and welcome to the weekly webinar. Boy, we have quite a big crowd today. I think we've set the record for 2015. That's not surprising because we're in a three-part series talking about Windows 10. This is the second of three webinars. So first, let's first talk about that. Last week we had a webinar on Windows 10 last Thursday about the killer features of Windows 10. Today we have a deploying conversation. And then next Thursday, the 19th at 12 noon Pacific, we have a conversation with some advanced topics, including Office 365 and other questions I've gathered and will continue to gather. So that's next Thursday. You'll get a follow-up email from Jennifer Hallmark at SMB Nation after this webinar with some links, one of which is to register for the webinar next week. With all that said, with all that housekeeping done, a couple of things going on at SMB Nation as we turn the corner towards the end, and I can't believe it, but the end of 2015, we are seeing some great conversations concerning how people are starting to line up for 2016. What are they going to do? What are they going to do differently, et cetera? So we're going to explore those conversations. The best place to do that is our main property, smbnation.com. Also bookmark 0365nation.com, where we have a conversation that, quite frankly, is a little more Windows, Office 365 centric. And then don't forget about our redhead stepchild cousin, Telefonation, where we have a unified communications and VoIP conversation. As for us, look for us to have some new conversations next year in terms of the business side, start over, start up, as well as Internet of Things. So with that said, again, if you came in a little bit late, I see some people are still coming into the room. This is Harry Brailsford, SMB Nation, coming to you live from downtown Seattle. And this is the weekly webinar, Windows 10 Deploying, with Grant Thompson, one of our top speakers, and always a pleasure to circle back around with Grant. Grant, first of all, I want to applaud, sir. You have remained committed to being very deeply technical while growing a company. That's hard to do, sir. Welcome aboard and good afternoon.
Thanks, Harry. You flatter me, as always. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. And for those of you who are just joining, we haven't gotten into any content yet, so sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee and a notepad or OneNote, and we'll get started on this. Today we're going to cover deploying Windows 10. We'll talk about some of the traditional methods of deployment that have existed and the changes that are there for those, as well as new ways to deploy. And we'll spend a bit of time first on the upgrade process versus a clean deployment. My background, I'm founding partner of MG Technology Group, based just outside of Seattle, Washington. And we're a leading cloud services provider. We run Microsoft Azure in data centers in Seattle and Portland, have a number of hosted services, work with Office 365. I'm a solutions architect as well as one of the founding partners. So I'm deeply technical, as Harry mentioned, across a lot of different fronts. My contact information's up here. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or on Twitter, although I don't do a lot of tweeting, but you can reach me that way. And I'm happy to be a resource for anybody that's out there. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, first we're going to talk a little bit about the upgrade to Windows 10. One of the big wins here is that it's free. That's a huge thing from Microsoft. I'm sure most, if not all of you, are aware of that. That offer is for a limited time. I think they've given you a year to complete this. You know, they can always change their mind, so we'll see what happens with that if it gets extended, but definitely something that you want to take advantage of if you're eligible for it. So it's free for anyone running Windows 7, 8, or 8.1. You can reserve it through the Get Win 10 app that should have automatically downloaded to your computer and show up as the little Windows 10 icon down in your system tray, which is down by your clock. If that's missing, make sure to go and do your Windows updates, get your machine fully updated, because that's how that app is delivered. Or if you're in a company that has group policy, that may be restricted, and then of course you want to talk to your IT department or IT consultant to see if that's something that they're ready to roll out. We'll talk a lot about the upgrade process here this afternoon, and so if they have questions and they haven't seen the webinar, you could point them back to that. Or if you're an IT professional on the line, we'll give you the information you need. Go ahead, Harry.
Yeah, Grant, and I'll probably pester you throughout the day. By the way, I've just gotten a note. Thank you, sir, for the comment. By the way, folks, use the chat feature. Oh, it's a ma'am that provided this note, an authoritative expert in this area. Grant, just to clarify, let me finish my first thought. I'll get back to my second thought. It's free through June 29th. So thank you, ma'am, for sharing that information. And then, folks, more importantly, use the chat feature to communicate with us with the questions you have, and I'll ask that when appropriate. But Grant, I have a question for you, and I don't know the answer, and if you don't have the answer as well, I'm wondering if this is, when it's free, and maybe we'll add this to our growing list of advanced topics for the third webinar, is this include the enterprise agreements, EA agreements? I'm kind of thinking Microsoft likes to make money off those EA agreements. Do you know the answer, or should we put it on our list for next week, sir?
Wait for the next slide.
Ah, wow, you're good. Okay, all right. I'll go back on mute, Grant. I'm sorry, bro.
All right. No worries. So again, if you don't have the little Windows 10 icon down by your clock, make sure you're fully updated, or talk to your IT admin or IT consultant to find out why it's not there, because it should be delivered automatically, but it can be blocked for those people who want to have control over their environment. The upgrade itself depends, like always, on the hardware that you're running the upgrade on. Typically, we see them taking between 1 to 2 hours, and that's an automated upgrade. So you kind of kick it off and walk away and come back in an hour or two, or if you're a techie, you sit there and stare at the screen and read all the things that the developers wrote throughout. Obviously, on older, slower hardware, it might take a little longer, but this is an average to give you an idea of what that upgrade process is going to take, what your time investment is. So this is a more detailed bit of information about the upgrade. So in Windows 10, we've simplified or Microsoft has simplified the additions of Windows 10. So we have Windows 10 Home, Pro, and Enterprise and Education now. And on the left side here, if we're looking at, get my pointer up here, so if we're looking at Windows 7 on the left here, this shows you the edition. If you're coming from Starter or either of the Home editions, your free upgrade is going to take you to Windows 10 Home. If you're on Pro or Ultimate, you're going to get Windows 10 Pro. There is no Ultimate in Windows 10. And then this talks about from Windows 8. So if you're on Windows Phone 8, you're going to go to Windows 10 Mobile when that's released. If you're on Windows 8.1 Pro, you're going to go to Pro. If you're on just regular 8.1, you're going to go to Home. And then down below here in the footnotes is highlighted what Harry was referencing, and that is some editions are excluded. So you notice there's no Enterprise up in this chart. The Enterprise editions are exempt from, or the free upgrade is not available to them. Typically, Enterprise customers are on software assurance or an Enterprise agreement that they're already paying for their software, and so they're entitled to the upgrade as part of that contract. It doesn't change the terms of their contract or any of the benefits. So if your company has an Enterprise agreement or software assurance in place, then you're eligible for that under that contract versus what we would call the consumer edition, which is eligible for the free upgrade without an agreement.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So again, here's our editions: Home, Pro, Enterprise, and Education for Windows 10, simplified a lot. If anybody's wondering, we had Ultimate. Are the features different? There are some things. Windows Media Center, as far as we know, is gone, but Pro encompasses what would have been the Ultimate edition of previous versions of Windows. So it's pretty much full-featured, save some of the enterprise features. Some of those enterprise features and education edition features that are included are things like domain join. That's not available in Home. It is available in Pro, as it has been in previous editions. And I have a little footnote here. If you're on Home and you work in education, there is an upgrade path licensing-wise from the Home edition to the Education edition. So if you have a Home edition device and your academic organization wants to take advantage of the Education edition and they qualify for that, then you can do an upgrade for that. Enterprise includes direct access, which is an advanced technology allowing access to corporate resources that are inside what we call the corporate four walls or on the corporate network from outside securely without a VPN connection. Very cool technology. It's actually been around for about 6 years, maybe 7, and still not used extensively in the mid-market. A lot of enterprises use the technology. Windows to Go is available in Enterprise and Education. That is the ability to actually run Windows off of a USB stick. If you want to take advantage of this, it would require you to get a certified Windows to Go USB stick. It's very intensive, and so you want to make sure you have not only the size that's required or more, but also the device needs to be built very robustly, able to handle extra heat and things like that, so that it doesn't, break, essentially. And so those are available. You can find those on lots of different technology stores. Just look for Windows to Go certified USB stick. And what this allows you to do is load a copy of Windows onto a USB stick, and so then you could take that USB stick instead of a device, plug it into somebody else's computer, and have access to your Windows running off the USB stick, do whatever you needed to do while you were there, and then shut down, take the USB stick out, bring it back to your office, and plug it back in and have all your changes and everything all available to you. So essentially makes Windows to Go Windows portable without having to take the computing device with you. App Locker is another feature in Enterprise and Education that allows you to control which applications the user can run. So you can disable applications and prevent them from launching those. Branch Cache is a technology if you have multiple sites for distributing files across those sites and keeping them in sync. And for those of you in IT management, we get Start Screen Group Policy. So we can now modify Start Menu, Start Screen, tiles, and things like that using group policies. You can push those changes out and have it standardized across your organization. A couple other things to point out between the editions. You can upgrade from Pro to Enterprise. In Enterprise and Education, you can do what's called sideloading, a line of business application, for example. That allows you to load things that are not available in the Windows Store, but that are Windows Store style apps, and load those into Windows or install those into Windows. Coming soon is Windows Store for Business, which will take this one step farther, allowing you to have a private store for your organization that has your pre-purchased line of business applications, or making public applications available to the users, but in a restricted context. So allowing them to install only corporate approved applications versus having the whole Windows Store available to them. Mobile device management is available, and also joining Azure AD, which can enable single sign-on, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a couple of minutes. Finally, enterprise and education, as well as pro, include BitLocker. Been around for a while. That's hard drive encryption technology. So if you leave your laptop or tablet in a cab, if BitLocker's on, it would be nearly impossible for someone to extract the data from the drive without credentials. They can't take the drive out and plug it into another machine because the drive is encrypted. And then two new features, Credential Guard and Device Guard. I put a little star there because they do require additional hardware support. Credential Guard is new. It's based on virtualization, security technology, and it prevents things like pass the hash or pass the ticket attacks for those techies on the call. It's a way to more securely deal with credentials and authentication within the device itself. So it really locks down credentials that are passed around inside the device, preventing malware from gaining access to those. If there happen to be a piece of malware on the device, those things are secured one level deeper. And then Device Guard, I mentioned App Blocker, which allows you to control which applications a user can run on Windows 10. Device Guard, again, takes that one step further, and it allows the corporation to define applications that are signed, meaning they have a certificate that's signed on their files that are needed to run the application. If that signature is missing or has been altered in any way, the application won't run. That prevents things like if we take Word.exe or WinWord.exe and we replace that with a piece of malware, but we name it the same. Today, if you were to double-click that, it would execute that application, even though it's a piece of malware. Hopefully, your antivirus would catch that, or anti-malware would catch that at that moment. With Device Guard, it absolutely would, because the signature would be missing or altered, and so it wouldn't allow the application to launch. So making some significant headway through Windows 8, where we saw the introduction of secure BIOS and secure boot, so that the OS can't have that kind of thing happen to prevent things like rootkit attacks. And then these two, we're really making some significant changes under the hood to provide defense against malware at a much deeper level in the operating system than running antivirus or anti-malware on top. Windows does come with Windows Defender in all the editions, so you do have the out-of-the-box malware, standard malware protection as well. Windows as a service. We'll shift gears slightly here, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this afternoon. We could probably do a whole webinar on this, but you'll hear this term thrown around, and as we move to more cloud-based applications, the term as a service has been tagged on to lots of things. Software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. So now we have Windows as a service. The idea behind this is different than what we would think of in terms of cloud. Really, it has to do with Microsoft's change in the way that they develop and release Windows. Now, Windows 10 was built using this methodology, which is why it got to market so fast and has been so successful in terms of its feature set, reliability. And basically what they do is Microsoft is taking feedback from users, and they're incorporating that at the very beginning of the development cycle. And then as they create a working build, even if it has some known issues, they create a working build and then they release that to a small group within Microsoft. And they call these things rings. So if you think of ripples in a pond, they start with a very small ring, let those users test it, use it, give them feedback, and then once they make changes based on that feedback, they'll release it to the next ring out, which encompasses more people, maybe 1,000 people inside of Microsoft. They get that feedback, they move to the next iteration, and it continues out through these different rings. The last two rings include, or can include, you. So you can join the Windows Insider program, and there are two tracks. There's a fast track and a slow or a normal track. The fast track gets the release one ring earlier than the normal release folks, and then you have the ability through an app that runs in Windows 10 to provide feedback directly to the Windows development team. They aggregate all those results and look at that and use that to control the direction that they're working on, both in new features as well as in fixes and enhancements to existing features. And then they put that through the ring system again until they get to a general release. One of the things that we're going to see, as we have with Office 365, is that new features as well as fixes will come out through the Windows update process. So you're going to see Windows evolve over time rather than having so many distinct versions where we have to wait until this next milestone before we see this set of new features. That doesn't mean that we're ending with Windows 10 and that Windows 10 is just going to be forever and continue to evolve. I'm sure we will see future versions of Windows, but you're going to see new features and things pop up in Windows as they're ready for release. And again, if you want to join the Insider program, then you can take advantage of both seeing those things early as well as being involved in the development process.
Hey, and Grant, let me comment on the Windows Insider program. You know, you're in the Seattle area. Of course, I'm in the Seattle area, and we're some days, you know, probably more fortunate than we deserve with our Microsoft relationship. So I've met a few of the characters in the Windows Insider program. I met the vendor that essentially handles a lot of the motion for that, and then a couple individuals on the team. And what I want to tell you guys is, you know, and it's been a while since I've talked to him, but Grant, it was, I mean, last time I talked to him, I know it was like 4 million people in the program, and it maybe they told me 6 or 7, but it's a very large number of people in the Windows Insider program. And then they were very supportive of our efforts back in June. We very quickly fit in a 5-city tour before June 30th. Jenny was on that. Our friend and speaker Nora was on that. So Grant, what I'm getting at is sign up. I mean, it's basically a very simple form. Sign up, stay in the loop, and just as it says, Windows Insider program.
That's a good plug, and really it is. It allows us to be involved heavily in the Windows development life cycle. And because of this, they're producing code faster, more reliably, and more targeted at what the end users ultimately want, which is a fabulous thing. So let's talk about upgrades. So if you're upgrading from Windows 7 or Windows 8.8.1, very important to uninstall any VPN clients that you have out there unless there has been a patch. There are some specific ones that I've seen personally and heard feedback on causing problems, so our general recommendation is if you have a VPN client installed on the machine, uninstall it, complete the upgrade to Windows 10, and then reinstall your VPN client. As time goes on, this may go away, but right now that's one of our best practices for Windows 10 upgrades. Make sure your PCs are fully updated before. Don't try to skip updates and think that you're just going to go to Windows 10 and have it be there. There are some updates that have been released prior to Windows 10 being released, as well as after, that include things that make that upgrade process go smoothly and mitigate some of the problems that we've seen out there. The VPN client issue, just so we're clear, resides squarely with the people who developed the VPN clients and them needing to upgrade their code a bit to make it through that upgrade, and that just frankly hasn't been done. So I don't know if we'll see it or not, but you know, Microsoft's done everything they can to mitigate that, and we still recommend that you uninstall it. So uninstall your VPN client, make sure your Windows updates fully installed on the PC. If you're on Windows 8, that will include the update to Windows 8.1. Once you get fully updated, you can then kick off the upgrade process and go through that without issue. However, if you do run into an issue, as I did on July 29th, I upgraded my Surface to Windows 10. I didn't know about the VPN client issue at that time. I had one installed, and when I came up, I had no Wi-Fi, I had no networking. Essentially, the entire network stack was gone, and so I was a bit frustrated and tried everything that we could think of to get it working again. Ultimately failed at doing that, and then we use the free rollback that exists. So essentially for 30 days, you have a full backup copy of your previous version of Windows sitting there waiting for you. Your data is preserved during the rollback, so if you've created a new Word document or edited a PowerPoint or something like that, you're not going to lose those changes. And the rollback takes about 15 or 20 minutes on average, so you can very quickly go back if you discover, oh, I forgot to uninstall the VPN client, now I can't connect to anything. You can roll back, uninstall that VPN client, reinitiate your upgrade, and get through it. TPM may block domain joins, so if you have TPM turned on a device, typically this is on corporate devices, but sometimes people have it turned on their personal devices. The best way to deal with that is just to turn that protection off, join the domain, and then turn that protection back on so that you can get through the domain join process. It doesn't do it 100% of the time, so you can try your domain join. If it fails, try turning TPM off and then joining the domain and turning it back on. For those IT pros out there, if you're going to do your upgrade from an ISO image, a DVD image, or from a DVD itself, make sure that you have the product key for the copy of Windows that is running on the machine prior to initiating the upgrade. If you upgrade in place using the Get Win 10 app, which will automatically download the Windows 10 bits to the computer and run the upgrade for you, it gets the product key out of Windows as it does the upgrade. If you do it from an external device or from an ISO file, it doesn't get the product key, so it'll ask you to enter it in order to validate that you're eligible for the free upgrade. So make sure you have that ahead of time. So changing things in terms of our deployment, typically for IT professionals, when we wanted to do an upgrade, we would do a clean install. We would wipe and reload that device with a brand new clean copy of Windows 10 from a DVD, erasing everything that's on it, and that was generally best practice for doing upgrades, just to make sure that everything went smoothly, that we didn't have remnants of the old operating system on there, or potentially run into problems down the road. Microsoft has taken the knowledge and experience over the last however many years we've been doing it this way, and has improved the upgrade process, providing 30-day rollback as part of that, as well as improving the upgrade process in terms of what it cleans up and making sure that the operating system is installed cleanly without remnants, without issues, so that when we get through the upgrade, we don't have a machine that may not run as well as it would if we had done a clean install. And they've automated a lot of this for us to make our life easier. So we don't have to wipe and reload the device. Now we can, as IT professionals, do a managed in-place upgrade. You can do configuration, what they call runtime configuration, so you can customize the deployment of Windows 10, the upgrade of Windows 10, without having to create an image, a base image that has Windows 10 and some of the customizations that you want to do already in it. This significantly reduces validation and deployment costs. The amount of time that you as an IT professional have to spend preparing, creating images, and getting ready to do the upgrades or deployments has been significantly reduced or eliminated. And so then that saves you all that time, energy, and therefore money in terms of your deployment. And it's much simpler to do the deployments as well.
Hey, Grant, by my count, you said how many number of years. I just went to the Wayback Machine. By my count, it's 30 years, sir. 30 years.
Well, there we go. That's a lot of experience.
Hey, Grant, I'll tell you what, Grant, bottom of the hour, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. So
Sounds
folks,
good.
I'm getting a lot of your questions up on chat. I'm not ignoring you. Today what I'm going to do is probably marshal those questions more for the end. So be patient. A couple of questions were actually op-ed opinion pieces. That's fine. But I want to acknowledge if you joined the webinar a little bit late, this is the weekly webinar from SMB Nation on the Windows 10 deployment. Next week will be part 3 of our 3-part series. You'll get a link in the thank you notification from Jenny later today to sign up for part 3. And we're enjoying the company of Grant Thompson. So Grant, go ahead and continue.
Thanks, Harry. So next we're going to talk a little bit about application and device compatibility. This is always the big issue with upgrades or deploying new editions of any operating system. Are my applications going to work? Is it going to run on the hardware that I already own? And these are a lot of headaches that IT professionals have had to deal with. So they've, again, made some significant improvements in the way that this process works. First of all, if you have hardware that will run Windows 7 or that meets the requirements for Windows 7, the hardware requirements have not changed. And that, to me, is a big deal because we all remember the days where if you wanted to run the newer edition of Windows or some other operating system, you were going to have to buy a new device. And Microsoft has really heard that and made it so that Windows 10 will run on anything that runs Windows 7. And so you can rest assured that if the hardware meets the requirements for Windows 7, you can upgrade and it will run Windows 10. I mentioned some features. There are some things like Windows Hello and Device Guard and Credentials Guard, those things that do require some additional hardware. Windows Hello, for example, is new authentication using fingerprint, so you'd need a fingerprint reader either in the device or added on. It also has iris and facial recognition technology, but you'd need the special camera in it in order to support that. But in terms of core operating system, having what you had before and taking advantage of all the new features that exist in Windows 10, you can do that with your existing hardware. Again, as long as it meets the requirements for running Windows 7, it'll run Windows 10. So that's big news, especially for businesses that have a significant hardware investment. There's incredibly strong desktop and application compatibility. Microsoft tested more than 10,000. I want to say they've topped 15,000 applications, although I don't have a hard number. Harry may want to go off and bing that one to see what the actual number is, but an amazing amount of effort went into application compatibility testing. Microsoft has worked on application compatibility heavily since Windows XP was deployed. They developed a thing called application compatibility, AppCompat, that allows them to actually fix some things that developers did wrong or that aren't compatible with the newer versions of Windows. And they can apply those fixes themselves through AppCompat. So essentially, Windows detects the application, knows what it needs to do to allow it to run, and then makes those changes on the fly without the user seeing it at all. So most of the applications that you find are just going to run on Windows 10. We have yet to run into a single application other than the VPN client issue that I mentioned previously, but as far as line of business applications and those things, if they ran on Windows 7, Windows 8, they run on Windows 10. Of course, everything that's in the Windows Store is going to be compatible and run on Windows 10 as well. So if you've got investment in applications that you've bought off the Windows Store, those are going to run fine on your Windows 10 deployment. For enterprises, there's a lot of web applications out there that still require very legacy versions of Internet Explorer, and backwards compatibility still exists in Internet Explorer. Even though we have a new browser, Edge, Internet Explorer 11 is still deployed by default in Windows 10. and that still has all the backwards compatibility functionality in it. So if you're working in an enterprise that has some legacy system that requires IE 7 or 8 or something of that nature, you can still allow your users to take advantage of that application using the backwards compatibility there. Getting a little bit of background noise there.
Oh, okay, that's me. I'll go quick. But Grant, the whole browser compatibility conversation is very interesting. And briefly, folks, what I want to do is just kind of share a real worldism. But as you work with forms, so let's say that you have a customer that uses forms to get customers to sign up, and maybe those become leads. But as you work with different forms programs, just take this, under advisement. But IE 11, some of the other browsers out on the market, you'll often see they behave differently with forms. And I'll just leave it at that, Grant. But that's something I've been working with most recently, and I'm always amazed at how the behaviors can be just a little bit different between browsers and forms. I don't know if you've encountered that, but I recently did.
Yeah, for sure. Web application compatibility is a significant issue, especially in enterprises that have a lot of custom line of business applications or homegrown applications that they've spent, sometimes millions of dollars creating, and they need to ensure that those things are going to continue to work as they move through newer operating systems and newer browsers. And my hat is definitely off to Microsoft for providing strong backwards compatibility support for legacy web applications. And that's fantastic that people don't have to spend a bunch of money on upgrading those things. Obviously, at some point, they're going to need to be brought into the current age, but maybe those are migrating to new systems or to cloud systems over time. And so suffice to say, if you're worried about IE compatibility, that exists still. Even with the new Edge browser, you can still use IE. You can still roll it back in terms of its compatibility mode to the previous versions of Internet Explorer to make those things run. So let's talk about deployment choices. So I mentioned that kind of the whole wipe and load process, our traditional process, has been replaced with a new methodology. The truth is that it still exists. So if you want to continue to do that traditional deployment, if that's what you're familiar with, if your processes are built around that, you can continue to operate that way. And essentially that process works the same as it always has. You're going to capture the data and settings off of the device, likely using a tool. And then you're going to deploy an OS image, probably a custom image that you've created. You're going to inject the drivers for your specific hardware, install the apps if they're not able to be installed in your base image, and then you're going to restore the user's data and settings. Again, we're talking about an upgrade here. And you can still do that for any type of scenario that you can imagine, just like we always have been. So Microsoft has not taken away the option to do that. They've just given you a better way, should you choose to move to that, which is definitely what I would recommend in terms of saving yourselves headaches. But sometimes adopting a new process requires some time to get new documentation, test it, try it, plan it. If you don't have time to do that right now, you can still incorporate it into your traditional process as it is, with a few minor changes, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the updates to the tools that you probably use for that. This middle section here where we're talking about in-place upgrade, this is really the new methodology for doing an upgrade that, again, typically we wouldn't have done this in a corporate environment. Consumers do this all the time. Generally, it's been a best practice in corporate or managed environments that we would do the wipe and load process, and Microsoft has really made the in-place upgrade as good, if not better, than the wipe and load process. So Windows is going to do the work for you. It's going to preserve all the data, settings, apps, and drivers, making the necessary adjustments along the way to those drivers to make sure that the machine runs when Windows 10 comes up. It's going to install a standardized base image, so you're not dealing with a custom image that may be difficult to support or require you to go back and modify your image to make sure that it's current for what your needs are. You can continue to use that standard base image, and then it's going to restore everything. It's going to put all the user's data there. It's going to restore all their settings, applications, drivers. All of that stuff is going to all be in place and be ready to go for the user once the upgrade is complete. This is Microsoft and our recommended way for doing upgrades for existing devices running Windows 7, 8, or 8.1. Again, if you're on 8, you're going to do your Windows updates and you're going to end up on 8.1 anyway, because you definitely want to make sure you're fully patched before you kick off the upgrade process. But this is an automated way to get from start to finish with very little work, and out the other side it works and it's reliable and stable for the user. On the provisioning side, meaning a new device, you can now transform a device, as I mentioned earlier, from Pro to Enterprise. All you have to do is enter your Enterprise product key and reboot the machine, and all the Enterprise features will light up. So you don't have to go through a reinstall or re-imaging or any complex or simple upgrade process. Put in the product key, reboot the device, and now it's an Enterprise device. You can, through provisioning, remove extra items. So, for example, if a user has gone out and purchased a device from a technology store and they come in, or from an OEM, and it has applications on it that you don't want to have on that device, as part of your provisioning process, you can remove those extra items to keep the installation clean and meeting your organization standard. You can also add your own organizational apps so that those applications get preloaded on the device during the provisioning process, as well as configuration of the device. So if you have particular standards that you want to implement on every new device, you can add that to your configuration so that when the device is provisioned, again, even if it came with the OS preloaded on it, you can send that provisioning configuration out to it and have that thing configured the way that you need for your organization, versus you having to get the device, put the corporate image on it, and do all the setup and everything like we've traditionally done, and then deploy it to the user. Some organizations, especially in the SMB market, will allow users to choose from maybe a set of 2 or 3 or 5 devices that they've pre-selected, and say, you can go buy this particular brand of tablet or this particular brand of laptop, and you can choose from these 3 or 4 models or 2 models, depending on what the user wants. The user selects that. They can even self-order perhaps, and then you can push your configuration out to those machines. Again, converting it from Pro to Enterprise, removing those extra items, putting on corporate configuration and whatnot, without you actually having to touch the device, which is amazing. Our traditional deployment, as we mentioned, still exists. Full support for all the ways that we're used to doing things, so your existing processes haven't been abandoned or forced you to abandon them. There's a couple of things to mention. There's a new assessment and deployment toolkit, so you definitely want to be using the new one. Great thing is it supports back to Windows 7. So if you still have Windows 7 in your environment, but you want to start deploying Windows 10, but you may still need to deploy Windows 7, you can do that using the same kit, so you don't have to have 2 separate systems running in order to do that. If you're using System Center 2012 or newer, there are some minor updates to that will add support for Windows 10 to do deployments through that. Likewise, to the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit 2013 adds support through an update for Windows 10. So if you're using those tools, which if you're doing the traditional wipe and load with a custom image, you're probably using 1 or more of these, then you can continue to use those. Just make sure you get the new assessment and deployment kit, as well as make sure your other products are up to date, and then you can continue to operate as you have. They really haven't made much change to the existing processes that you have in place, so it's going to feel natural. It's not some crazy new thing that you have to learn. It's basically the same process that you used for Windows 7 and Windows 8.1. Just to be clear, we're talking about traditional deployment methodology, not the newer methodology. They've left that unchanged essentially so that it's easy for you to make that transition to deploying Windows 10, and then if you want to start taking advantage of the new deployment methodology, you can do that. So essentially, you can drop in a Windows 10 image, create a master image the same way that we always have, loading apps and configuration settings and things that will survive the creation of an image, and then you can do your wipe and load deployments as you have done in the past. But I strongly urge you to look at this, which is the idea of provisioning and not re-imaging. And this is very simple, off-the-shelf hardware. You apply a provisioning package, and then the device is ready to use for the user. And it really is this simple once you create the provisioning package, and we'll step through that in a moment. The provisioning package can be deployed through an SD card or a USB stick. It could be downloaded. You could email it to the user, so no longer does the device even have to be on-premise. It doesn't have to be at your desk or on a workbench to be able to do this process. They could be in Alaska, and you could be in Seattle. They could buy the device, download the provisioning package, or grab it in an email and apply it to their device and be up and running very quickly. So enterprise upgrades in place is the recommendation for Windows 7, 8, and 8.1. You still get the rollback for 30 days. You can still do a full install. Some of the reasons that you might want to do a full install are things like changing from 32-bit to 64-bit. If you're moving from a legacy BIOS, which is the not secure way of booting, to UEFI, which provides the secure boot and some other advantages, then you need to do a full install. If you have Windows to Go already deployed, or boot from VHD being a virtual hard drive. Those are things you'll typically only see in enterprises. If you have those, do not try to do in-place upgrades on either of those. Create brand new ones of Win 10. If you use third-party disk encryption, the in-place upgrade can't obviously bypass that encryption, and so the in-place upgrade would fail because it wouldn't be able to do the things it needs to do at that low level. I have had some folks who say they've been able to turn it off, but it's probably more trouble than it's worth unless you want to go through the testing or verify with your vendor that it's going to work. And then if you're doing images, if you have images, again, existing images, that's your methodology, then you're going to do your full install. If you've got dual boot or multi-boot machines, you can't do an in-place upgrade, so you need to do a full install on those as well. As I mentioned, your in-place upgrade between Pro and Enterprise is all you have to do is enter the product key. The dynamic provisioning that we've been talking about, downloading a provisioning file from an email or from a USB stick, you can configure VPN, you can configure Wi-Fi settings, so those things can be in there. You can load additional applications. You can configure common Windows settings, although not as much as group policy, but you can get a lot of them. You can force enrollment in mobile device management like Intune. And then for those with Pro and above, you can dynamically provision through Azure AD. So you can join the device to Azure AD, and when the user joins that device, you can force it into MDM, which would then push the package out to the device automatically and configure the device according to your specifications. The package configuration is created using Windows ICD, which is the imaging and configuration designer, and I'll show you a little bit about that here in 2 seconds, or maybe 60. And we could put that configuration out on a network share through USB, email, and then your traditional deployments are going to be done through bare metal using Windows Assessment and Deployment Toolkit, the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, or System Center Configuration Manager. So all of those things are available to you. We heavily recommend that you look at the dynamic provisioning using packages, again, because it'll simplify your life greatly, as well as enable your users much faster. Updates coming soon. Windows Update for Business is going to inject an extra layer into the Windows Update process to allow you to take control of those updates. You can still use Windows Server Update services to control and deploy updates in a corporate environment, as well as System Center Configuration Manager and Group Policy Management of just basic Windows Update settings. So much of that hasn't changed, except that we're getting a Windows Update for Business to allow us to take control of updates without using any of these other products, which is going to be an excellent win for corporate. So now I'm going to go through a bit of a demo. I did it as a click-through in the interest of time, but it'll show you how we can simply build a basic package in the Imaging and Configuration Designer. So this is what it looks like. This is just a tool like the Assessment and Deployment Kit that you can download. It's very simple and clean, easy to use. And essentially what we do is from this screen we're going to create a new package, and when we do that it's going to ask us some basic information, give it a name, give it a location of where we're going to save our configuration package. If we want to add a description, then we can. We can select the Windows edition. Notice that Windows Phone is on here, so coming soon we'll be able to create these packages for Windows Phone 10 and then configure mobile devices as well. But for now we'll use the Windows Common, which would be for Windows 10. If we have an existing package, we can import it to start from that and build something that is based on that standard. In this case, I'm just showing very simply how we can upgrade Pro to Enterprise by entering the product key. So again, if the user bought a device, got Pro on it, they want to use it in the corporate network, they want to use it as a corporate device, you could give them a package. As part of that package we could have our corporate product key in here. You can screenshot this or copy it all you want. Suffice to say it doesn't work, so you're not getting a free enterprise upgrade as part of the presentation. But by putting this in here, when they apply that package to their device, then it will automatically enter that product key, and then on package completion, it'll ask them to reboot. When they reboot their machine, it'll now be Enterprise instead of Pro. Once we've got our settings, and you can see there's a lot of settings over here on the left-hand side we could set. We have the ability to control drivers. We have the ability to control some of the applications like IE, load certificates, all kinds of things that we can put in there. Once we've got all those set the way we want, then we can go ahead and create the package itself. And we go through that. If you want security on the package, like to encrypt the package, if it's got your product key in it and it's being distributed, you obviously want to make sure that you protect the content of the package. And then we have our output location for the package itself. And then the package is creating, and we get this PPKG. So this file is the package, and it shows us a link once it's done to the upgrade package, and then we could take that file, we could email that to a user or make it available for download, and the user would be able to double-click that package in Windows 10 and it will execute. You'll notice it's got the little application as its icon here, so it will actually execute that package just by double-clicking the file. It will provide some warnings for them, letting them know that they're about to apply changes to their system, and then it'll apply all the settings that you have, cause them to reboot, and then whatever changes you put in place will be now applied to their system. So very simple to create, very simple to deploy. This is an amazing win in terms of provisioning devices, as well as taking advantage of BYOD for users bring your own device. Very quickly, because I know we're running out of time here, we're going to go through, where are we at here? We're going through the actual applying of the package. I wanted to talk briefly about Azure Active Directory. So I mentioned that earlier, that you could join Azure AD. Azure AD is Microsoft's hosted Active Directory. It is based on Microsoft Windows Server Active Directory and is evolving over time to include a lot of the controls and tools that we have on premise and then some. So with Windows 10 Pro and above, you can join a device to Azure Active Directory. If you're using Office 365 already, you have Azure Active Directory Basic as part of that package. You just have to turn it on, and then you would be able to join devices there. Excellent for the SMB space who don't have a domain controller on premise. For those who do, you'll see on the left-hand side here, there is a way to connect your existing on-premises directory service, Windows Server Active Directory, with Azure Active Directory to synchronize the user accounts there. And what that does, especially with your device joined, it gives you single sign-on, not only to Microsoft services, but also to over 2,000 software as a service applications that exist out there. And that number's growing all the time. I think it's actually over 2,700 at this point, so that a user can have their credentials mapped between their secure Windows Active Directory account and these other services, both Office 365, Azure services, as well as over 2,000 software as a service applications that if corporate has allowed them access to those things, then they would be able to get into those without having to enter another username and password. And also from an administration standpoint, that simplifies provisioning as well as deprovisioning of users across all those services.
And Grant, what we'll do, if you don't mind, sir, is we'll check in on Azure and the AD concept next time as well. We have just a couple of minutes left. Grant, had a request? Yeah, you've actually fulfilled the request. Your email address. Thank you, sir. Well, you're ahead of the curve. Grant, we have a lot of questions. I'm going to have to push some of these over to number 3, webinar number 3, because last time, folks, quite frankly, we ran over time, and I know some of you allocated the hours to the webinar, and I want to be more respectful of that. So, Grant, I'm going to start at the top, and then we're going to push a couple questions next week. First question, can Windows 8.1 be upgraded to Windows 10 remotely using LogMeIn? LogMeIn.
You could initiate the upgrade through LogMeIn or some other remote technology, and then the upgrade process runs without user intervention. I haven't actually tested nor heard of anybody who's tested whether LogMeIn will automatically reconnect once it gets on the other side of the upgrade. So that would be a question for LogMeIn support. Post-upgrade, is it automatically going to make that machine available again? I would imagine it would, but definitely want to check with their support on that.
Okay, great. And then we have a snooping and spying question. I actually have that for next week. We had a similar question last week. Here's one, Grant. Boy, there's a bunch of them. And I will capture them all, folks. If I reinstall the whole system, how may I get a license key? How may I get a license key?
If you are reinstalling, you need to have, if you're installing from a DVD or from an ISO file, you're going to need to have your product key from your original Windows 7 or Windows 8 device license or Windows license in order to key that into the Windows 10 upgrade process to have that work. So you're going to use your Windows 7 or Windows 8 product key to do the Win 10 upgrade, even if you're doing a clean install upgrade.
Okay. And Grant, I'm going to take one more question, and Jenny, be sure to get all the questions to me so I can build out next week's webinar. We don't ignore these nice people. Final question, if you have 32-bit Win 7, are you stuck with 32-bit Win 10?
Yes, unless you do a clean install. That's required to change from 32-bit to 64-bit. You'd need to do a wipe and load. You'd need to do a clean install again, capturing, making sure you have your product key prior to initiating that process. But that's the only way to change from 32-bit to 64-bit. But you're entitled to the 64-bit version if your hardware supports it.
Okay, Grant, we got someone that's offered a comment. I've done 5 upgrades remotely using using LogMeIn without issues. Works great. Thank you. Have you seen any driver problems with upgrading? Only if the driver's been drinking. No. Come on, Grant. I like to get a little chippy, brother. You got to keep it. You got to keep it fun. We'll make that the final question. Any driver problems you're aware of with upgrading?
We've seen a few, not many. The biggest one that happened early on was around things like Sony BIOS that use SSD drives in a RAID 0. Some of the devices out there will have, say, a 256 gigabyte hard drive, and really what they've done is taken 2 128 SSDs and put them in RAID 0 so that they're acting as a single drive. And because there's a RAID driver involved there that wasn't compatible with Windows 10 out of the box, we saw some people try to do in-place upgrades with those. And on the initial reboot, it would come up and say operating system not found. So that was really unfortunate for that. Wasn't terribly difficult to get those to roll back. I believe Sony's since released some updates that'll allow that to work, but that's really the only major issue that we've seen. Because most things, again, a lot of preparation both on Microsoft's part as well as vendor parts to try to avoid those kinds of things, because it isn't good for either of them.
Okay, folks, so that brings the weekly webinar to a close. I realize I have about 10 more questions. I'm going to overflow those to webinar number 3 next Thursday at noon Pacific. Jenny's going to get you a link in the thank you letter. We are a couple minutes over, but again, committed to respecting your time. Thank you so much for attending. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.